So we are so excited to have on the podcast today, Keren Eldad, she's known as Coach Keren, specializing in taking high achievers out of the futility think of constant pursuit and into the greatest levels of success and fulfillment. She has coached Olympic athletes, politicians, and Hollywood stars, and global organizations like Estée Lauder and Nike. She's also the founder of The Club, a community supporting leaders to reach their full potential.
In her upcoming book, GILDED, Breaking Free from the Cage of Ambition, Perfectionism, and the Relentless Pursuit of More, Keren reveals how the relentless chase for our outward success often leads to a spiral of burnout. I mean, that is disillusionment and suffocating existence within the gilded cage that looks beautiful from the outside, but feels like a prison on the inside. This actually feels like university and college. This end goal, because we're talking about teenagers right now, that whole synopsis is what I feel like they're all racing to. And then they're like, what happened? And how did I get here? And what am I doing?
It's so true. And, so many of us, unfortunately, we stay in that gilded cage from that moment on. I want to share with you that I kind of remember when I started to live in my own gilded cage, and it was the 90s, and I blame Kate Moss.
Oh, yeah.
20,000 images of Kate Moss had been projected at me by all of the magazines. I was also already kind of wired to be an overachiever. I was wired for straight A's, and my parents were very influential in that, of course, as well. And if you combine that with that insane pressure from the outside to look like you've got it together and you're perfect, and that does affect maybe a smaller segment of kids, but some kids for sure, you start that tendency in probably your late teen years and into college. And it can be pretty detrimental. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah. And I can only imagine now and these days with not just the images that we see on TV and in the magazines and all of that. Now they have it at their fingertips every single time they pull up their phone.
When you say wired, right? Like you say wired. So are we saying that this need for achievement and perfectionism, do they go hand in hand?
Pretty much. The research I reference usually is the research of Jean Twenge, who wrote iGen, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, and the huge bestseller of the last year, which is Anxious Generation, and of Carol Dweck, who is a researcher from Stanford who coined the term growth mindset. And they're essentially saying that cultural factors will exacerbate this, but we're kind of born ready to compete, right? And those of us who are a little more competitive initially, we're rewarded for being more competitive initially, we're going to start becoming junkies and looking more and more and more and more.
Because Keren, traditionally, teenagers are known to be sort of aloof. And, after COVID, it was really hard to get kids to sort of buy back into the culture of what we're sort of speaking of. It almost went too far the other way for them to care. Where are we now with the teenagers? How many are driven for this high level of what we're talking about versus parents trying to light really the fire under them to get them to even have a quarter of what we're talking about?
Well, the first thing I'll say is not all of them. Overachievers are overachievers, no matter what. You can plug them out of the system and they will plug right back in because it is their nature and they are just naturally obsessive. This is a behavioral style, most of all. So there are freak shows like that. You just had on your podcast, Claire Dunphy, the amazing Julie Bowen from Modern Family. I'm obsessed with the show. I've watched every single episode 6 times. And that character, Alex Dunphy, played by Ariel Winter, plays her daughter. That actually does exist in society. There are people like that, and they will find ways to overstudy or to overperform in sports, et cetera, in any case. For those who are not, the ways to plug in is just to watch their interests, because their interests will plug them in. They will have naturally, perfectionism is a real thing, as I'm sure you know, and many of us are obsessive in lots of different directions. Just watch what exactly is capturing their attention, because they're probably just redirecting it to somewhere else. They're not completely aloof and aimless.
Oh my gosh, that's sad. That just thinking about that it would be for every child, it would be such a gift that if their parents were able to not necessarily just like put them into the one path, and find out what that is, that thing that is like, is actually attracting them. I always say, I never forget this one teacher, that my daughter had. She was in this class, she was doing well, but she didn't realize, she's like, I'm like, you're doing what, this is coming easy for you. And he told her, these are the whispers. Like if it's coming naturally to you and you're good at it, this might be something you might want to, and she was young, but it was like, it is those whispers. But I feel like so often for the kids who seem aloof, it's because they're being forced to be put in these channels that don't interest them.
That just don't interest them. They're not for them. And it's our job to be vigilant. And we can't just trust the teachers. Teachers are massively underpaid. I don't know if you know that.
Yes.
So I think it's a little too much pressure to also ask them to be very particular with your kid. But you can watch your kid. You can say, wow, this, you're a good dancer.
Yeah.
What can we do with that?
You know, so when you're saying these overachiever perfectionists, they're wired this way. So it sounds like you can't unwire them because that's just their nature. It's the way they've been born, the way they've been, whatever,
brought up.
So we're not going to change that in them. How are we going to make sure that they don't crash and burn because it's way too much for one person to have this much pressure?
I love this question. We don't change. Most of us behaviorally do not change, but we can stop over exacerbating our limitations and start emphasizing the good parts instead. And what it takes is to switch the way you think. So what we have to teach our teenagers is what we have to teach ourselves in the inner work. And there are three things primarily that I think help you to switch modes. They help you to stop using the parts. You know what the parts of your personality are that are just not particularly useful to you. For example, I have been accused of being somewhat reactive or intense. I have learned over my lifetime that chilling out is not going to kill me, usually going to produce better results. Now, the way to this is threefold. The first is, and I hope all the parents listening are also listening for themselves because your kids can see you and they know if you're phony baloney. First is that progress beats perfection. You have to really teach yourself that perfection doesn't exist. Stop being so outcome oriented. Stop being so temporary results focused. Stop taking a huge beating with every moment of criticism or every moment of a mistake. And if you can teach kids that, what did you learn is a better question to ask than, why did you miss that goal? You are definitely going to help them to gear towards that growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about, and a little less to the freak show that is the fixed mindset or perfectionism. The second thing is, and I say this to kids all the time, I didn't start out as a coach, by the way. I started out as a suicide counselor.
Wow.
And sadly, I want to tell you that most of the people who call a suicide hotline are under the age of 25. They are kids. And I talk about this all the time. Perfection doesn't exist. That should become a mantra. It doesn't exist. These are all lies. Everything they're telling you on Instagram and on TikTok, all of it. Forget the propaganda. It's lies. As grown-ups, you and I know that everything we see on LinkedIn is phony baloney, right? Have you seen posts on LinkedIn? They make me physically aggressive. It's all nonsense. I would like to thank Forbes for mentioning me on the 30 under 30 nonsense garbage list that I paid for. But by the way, I'm not going to tell you that I paid for it. I'm just going to take credit for it. It's awful.
Keren, we didn't know that for so long. And we were always so impressed by this. And then we're like, hold on. We know that person. They're not, there's no way they're on that list.
Stop it. They're lying. They're lying. And a lot of my clients too, like I actually know that they're lying and I'll catch them and say, okay, why are you doing that? You're literally shooting yourself in the foot. You're going to have to maintain an image that doesn't belong to you. You're going to suffer from crippling imposter syndrome. Teach your kids this is phony baloney, or at the very least, teach them run your own race. Your standards and other people's standards are not the same. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your pace and absolutely nothing wrong with your race. And the best way to do that is, of course, to model it. And then the last thing,
Keren, I know there's a third, but when schools geared to what is phony baloney, and the awards are for the highest achiever, and the plaques are for the kids who get the 99.9 in math. When you're preaching it, how are we
How do you prove it's
validating?
true?
How are we validating it when the world is validating something different?
Yes, we will have to teach them something very, very different, which is self-reliance or real appreciation of themselves, and just constantly remind them of who they really are. You know, in my family, my sister and I are very, very different. I was a born overachiever. I was a beast from a very young age, straight A's, not a problem, could dance, could sing, and I'm good looking too. My sister, who, by the way,
Funny.
fabulous looking, is adorable, but hated school, didn't understand it, didn't like any of it. Now, you can easily see how in the 80s and 90s, when we were little kids, parents didn't know any of this and were happy with the rewards for the overachiever, but they weren't. They rewarded cheerfulness. They encouraged her hobbies. They placed her in places in which she could thrive. They commended all of her exceptional gifts. For example, she's one of the best cooks I've ever met. There are so many enormous prizes in that. And as a result, she's led a very successful and very happy life.
How were your parents so
Wise.
wise? Yeah.
I know. I got lucky, I think. I mean, they were terrible in many ways. Please don't worry about that. They made all the mistakes, and I love reminding them of it. But I think my parents had two huge advantages. One is that they're preternaturally very cheerful. They're just cheerful, funny people, and they're kind of stoic. In other words, I remember one time coming home from school and saying, Dad, I got a terrible grade. I'm going to kill myself. And he opened the window and went, want me to push you?
Amazing.
Which is both funny and also not, he didn't freak out about anything. That's very, very useful to have as a parent. So I hope that it helps to show them and to genuinely believe that their gifts are just as impressive as the 99th percentile in math, which, by the way, isn't going to make you too many friends in high school. There I said.
I know, but
My God,
I don't know if it's happening in America right now. Actually, I know it is, where this whole like percentile of to get into post-secondary, like you need a 99 or like a whatever 4.0, whatever these like measurements are. Like they feel that, like that is the rhetoric. That's the rhetoric online. That's like, you're not going to get here. Like, how are we battling? And I want you to finish your third point. I apologize. I just know as parents, we get bought into, oh my gosh, my kid's on honor roll. Oh my God.
I don't think you're going to be able to do this because they're your children, but they will listen to someone like me because I'm not their mom. There's also an awesome episode, by the way, on Modern Family where Claire intervenes with somebody else's kids and she's like, why aren't they listening to me? Because you're their mother. But when it's not their mother, we can offer them something else, which is wisdom. We can tell them a little bit more straight-faced, that doesn't matter. Do you know that Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of school? Did you know that there are millions of people out there who are immensely talented and immensely successful who don't have a university degree or don't have a particular university degree? For example, the possibly next president of the United States went to Howard University. It's a good university, but it's not an Ivy League university. Taylor Swift, the most successful young woman in the world. Where's her university degree? And so hopefully we can just reframe that and say, this isn't a necessity. Is there a way we can find something that's really well suited for you and that doesn't make you feel this way? There's absolutely no guarantee that walking into that stress pool is going to be beneficial for you. So hopefully when I reframe it, they're like, oh my God, that's totally right. When you say it, they'll be like, but it's my life.
Yeah. So and I'm assuming the seeds you plant, they'll begin to hear. Like if you keep talking about it, and if you actually believe it, they'll hear. And if you
model it, exactly. Because if you start having meltdowns and you never stop talking about the neighbors' kids in Harvard, they know.
It's really true because it's a lot of other conversation of people saying, here's so-and-so got a full ride here. So-and-so got like a scholarship there. I don't remember when we were in high school and anyone ever talking about that. But it's like, I don't know if it's because we're in Canada and I didn't really go to school. We went to a public school, but
we don't have scholarships in Canada too, but there is scholarships. They all hear about
them. You have very good schools. You've got McGill. Like there is a situation up there too. I don't think anyone is immune from this level of social pressure. And we weren't in the 90s anyway. Look, I want to say something really, really important. I think the problem with teenagers' problems is that we agree to the fact that they are problems or to the premise that they are problems. That's one of you're already losing if that's how you feel. It's the same with the suicide hotline. I always said, if you show up feeling real pity, if you show up thinking these people are in terrible distress and this is horrible, you can't help them. You're going to be completely useless to them. But if you start going, this kid is a superstar. Look at what this person has done. Look at this amazing human being. You have a completely different conversation with them. You have a completely different footing with them. Do you see how that might change the conversation?
Yes.
So when you get the report card, whether it's good or bad, whatever good or bad is, what's comments or when they get the test back, what is our responses as parents?
What's the mark?
Well, is it good? I don't think, does it matter?
I don't know. I think honestly, I would answer as a counselor rather than as a parent, which is focus a little less on congratulating the doing or the actual accomplishment and take a deep dive into the feeling. If you can, ask, how does this feel? Does anything feel heavy? Is there a reason why it feels heavy? Is there anything I can do to help?
And if it's amazing, are we like, congratulations? Or like, no.
For you, how does this feel? Does anything feel heavy? Are you stressed? Do you need any support? It's exactly the same thing. By the way, the kids who are cramming for tests and getting straight A's, they're the real freak shows.
In a good way or bad way?
Was one. We're stressed. One of the huge spikes we would see on the suicide hotline is exams. Kids who are overachieving and kids who are in particular zones that are overachieving. There's a wonderful book I just mentioned by Jonathan Haidt, The Coddling of the American Mind, way more disposed to extraordinary anxiety. So we have to reframe the conversation, I think, and we have to congratulate people and honor people more for their feelings than for their interests than for their actions and achievements, which again belonged in the cesspool that is LinkedIn.
Yeah, because I really like to find like tangible tools for parents, because I think it's for us as parents, and you spiral because you've also been fed that if you can't go to university, you won't get a job, you won't get it right. So you get these like, we all have narratives in our brains, and it's like it's really easy to be like, let's celebrate the process. But then when you're in it, it's really hard because what's potential? Are they like, how are we pushing without burning out? And how are we supporting that maybe they are more A-type or whatever that word is? And that's what, if we're not helping them or acknowledging their hard work, are we just defeating that are we giving them confidence because we're like, well, it doesn't matter what you do, like whatever, like find do you know what I'm saying? Like, how are we push-pulling the kids who are...
I understand. The first thing is extract yourself from that process, because you are push-pulling, and challenge your premises. Let's say, for example, that their grades are not good. This is objectively not good grades. You have two ways to look at this. Number one, they should have better grades. And number two, these are their grades. They should have better grades is a problematic premise, because they don't. You have to ask yourself, is that true? No. Why? Based on what? Why should they have better grades? For what? How do you know that the outcome is going to be more favorable if the grades are better and therefore they follow some linear path?
I only think sometimes as a parent, and I'd be completely wrong, if they express a want for something and they're not meeting it, is it our job to be like, well, you're saying you want this, but you're doing this doesn't match up. So you want to go to Harvard. Let's just say that's a lifelong dream. Yet you're not studying to get to like it, or is that just meeting dreams? Or like, because I think a lot of the parenting crisis right now is we're frozen in what we can and can't say. Like we're sort of all like,
I kind of feel like like going back to what does it feel like is like maybe these things, these unrealistic things that they have in their mind aren't really what they want, like getting to know themselves and what would make them happy. They're doing what I think you hear somebody doing, then but actually getting them to know themselves and be like, oh, maybe that was not a dream I wanted. That was something somebody else wanted anyways.
Now you're getting somewhere. Now you're not going to get anywhere near that if your assumption is that they have a problem, but they don't have a problem. And you don't have to worry too much about teaching them how to resolve the conflict between what they're doing and Harvard. The world will take care of that for you. The world will show them their results, and it is their job to rise to the results. If you assume that they're superstars and that this path ends well for them regardless, which is real hard for parents to do, they will end up where they're supposed to. Listen, let me give you a little cautionary tale. Would you like to hear one?
Yes, love to hear one.
Here's how this story ends. Keren overachieves all through high school. Then she goes not only to one college, but second degree at a very prestigious university. Straight A's throughout, valedictorian, killing it and grilling it. Then she gets a great job. Then she marries a tall man, which, as you know, is the holy grail of marriage. Everything on her Instagram looks amazing. And at 31, she finds herself absolutely suicidal, hating and I'm using that term correctly, everything I had created, because I had followed checkmark by checkmark by checkmark, and none of it was mine. Had I maybe learned how to check in with my feelings 10, 15 years earlier, and had Kate Moss perhaps eaten an extra sandwich, I'm pretty sure it would have ended up in a different place. Now, my parents didn't really have very much of a choice because what are you going to say to a kid who's getting straight A's?
Yeah. Well,
eat more? Basically, they were like, all right, I guess she's fine. And I'm like, I guess I'm fine.
Yeah.
What did it feel? What did it? Enormous advantages on the other side. There are enormous advantages to the kids who are just hitting that closed door. They actually might end up somewhere better.
Did you become I know we still have not gotten to 3, and we'd love to hear like the recap 1, 2, 3 again, so we can have that succinct, because I'm so interested in each one that you're going through. Did you become a suicide counselor because you had experience?
I wanted to get out of my own head and stop feeling so sorry for myself during my big breakdown in my 30s. And the first thing I thought was suicide counseling, actually not because of my experience with suicidal ideation, but because when I was in the army, I'm originally from Israel. I did that to just help people because there's always a suicide hotline in the army. And I was really good at it. And I liked it. So I thought, this is a great new hobby that's going to move me out of this. This really changed the way I thought about life, about the world, and about young people in general. I don't see them as anyone who needs our help anymore. I think they're unbelievable.
I agree with you on that one. So what is number 3? Yeah, what is number 3?
So the first was progress beats perfection. Teach them that, beat them over the head with it until they start rolling their eyes. The second is run your own race, or really everything you see is fake. And at least show them like fake. Here are my friends. Look, lying. And the third is friends are everything. Encourage in-person social interaction. I have a very good friend named Ellen Vora who wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Anatomy of Anxiety. And I was talking to her about what her number 1 tip is for anxiety for any age. And she's be social. She said, be social. I think that the biggest problem they have today is not what the screen is showing them, is that the screen is removing them. In suicide counseling, one of the first things we say is, can you talk to a friend? Is there anyone you can call? Once you start sharing shame and sharing pain, the pain diminishes. It starts to die in the light. If we can encourage company and friendship and interaction in person and model it, that's another thing my parents modeled for me. They're the most social weirdos on the planet. There's always people at their house. That's really, really helpful. They start to learn to connect to other humans in human form.
You know, Keren, I'm thinking about that, and I think through my like whole life, I was, always kept like girlfriends close. Still never really have an interest in sharing private things with men. But I really,
like a relationship.
Yeah, like a relationship. But I find it really easy to talk to girlfriends, and well, there's one thing is that it still is hard sometimes for teenage girls to tell their best friends what's really going on because they're still worried about their judgment. But aside from that, what is really scary, and I see it like with men, like, our husbands and stuff, I feel so sad for them that a lot of men don't have relationships where they can talk, like,
and teen boys.
We can talk about literally anything together. I don't know where I would put all of those feelings and thought if I didn't have a best friend to talk about it. And you know, like a few close people near me, it's really, I really don't know about teenage boys and where they put their thoughts and feelings. I feel like they must be so bottled up.
It sucks. It's terrible. I have a husband, and that poor man only has friends because of me. However, I have dealt with this a lot, and I can suggest two things. The first is, I don't think shallow relationships are a bad thing. I think shallow relationships are just as good. They make our day. There are people who just have interactions with us over the course of a day and say, "You look nice today," and "Have a great day," and "How you feeling?" and "Wasn't that a great class?" And that's already massive adrenaline, dopamine connection. So it's absolutely good enough. If they want to sit down and make TikToks together, if they want to just giggle, if they want to watch The Greatest Showman or whatever, go to a Taylor concert, that's good enough. The same goes for men. Men do not bond like we do. Women bond by looking at each other. This is why you're so close, you're so comfortable with each other. They're not like that. They see this as a sign of aggression, but they do bond side to side. So all they have to do is, I don't know, get interested in fishing or something, or bike together, or even play their video games, but not in simulation, side by side. That way, they'll have enough of an exchange to keep them much, much more moderated, and they'll at least have someone to turn to. I don't think we can change the sexes, but we can encourage. No. And then finally, I think for men in particular, I can't say enough about coaching and therapy. Half of my clients are men. I think one of the great gifts for them is to be able to cry, to be able to talk about what's happening to them, to be able to have a sounding board that is not afraid of them. And that's very, very useful in general in life. The earlier, the better.
Yeah. And can that be like a sibling or like a, you know, or sibling relationships, a buffer, like a friend, like, is that considered a friendship?
It could be a coach. It could be like their basketball coach or whatever.
A therapist. It can be anyone that they have someone to like.
It can be a therapist, someone with whom they have really, really good rapport and who they see a little bit as a role model.
I think that's an interesting thing you said about the shallow relationships, because I think some parents worry that their kids don't have a lot of friends, or, you know, they had friends and they don't have friends anymore, but just being social and not being alone only online, it will just even a little bit is better than nothing.
Starbucks was my best friend when I first had
Me too.
The barista. I started drinking coffee because the barista would be like, "Hi, Jeff." They knew your name. Yeah, they know your name. And you're like, you could talk.
Why not? It's very useful. I moved 14 times by the time I was 18. My parents are diplomats, and you never have friends in the beginning, but you just start to get by very, very quickly on morning. How's everybody today? Even Germans will respond to a nice good morning. So,
I think it's a smile. It's a neighborhood, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's neighborly, and from neighborly, you start to build rapport, and from rapport, hopefully, you build friendships.
Yeah, and friendships come at there. Sometimes they're the in between, right? They're the mom that checks in like on the playground, but you don't go for coffee, but you catch up on the playground while you're waiting for your kids to play, or like, you know, those are friendships.
And you never know, in a moment you might just need someone like that.
Exactly. And by the way, they tend to, I mean, I'm sure you guys have been in a crisis in your lifetime. Those people are the weird people who usually show up.
We're big believer in those, like big believers, and they're like the in-betweens, you know, they're the in-betweens who just like have your back because you're a mom and they'll help you, like, or whatever, that friend who will just help you.
Exactly. And show them that, and don't try to be their friend, and they'll have friends too.
Wow. I mean, we all have so much to unlearn in life.
But I feel like I have a few things like right off the top of just when I look at them, when they come home from school today, I like just a little bit of a change in how I might speak to them, or what I might look for with like inside them, or for them to encourage them to see inside themselves. Where can you find more about it?
Spot also the difference between stress and real problems. I'm not a diagnostician, but I can tell you there is a line, and there are people who are genuinely, they require psychotherapy, and you are their parent, you will know the difference.
Yeah. And sometimes they flat out ask for it, right? Like they ask for support, and it's our job to help give it to them, not just be like, no, like it is our job to steer them in that direction.
If they ask for support, they're ahead of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Thank you, Keren. Where can people find more about you, your book, everything?
Well, thank you. Break Free with Gilded is where everybody can find the book. And I'm on KerenEldad.com. It's spelled with 2 E's, so not like a Karen, just a Karen.
I know.
I love it when you were like, and then there's someone named Karen. I was like, that's funny. And then it was you.
And
Yeah. Nice Karen. Good
and
Karen.
Keren, people can like book coaching through your website anywhere in the world with you.
Of course. Yes. And I have enormous sympathy for the parents of teens. So
Okay.
always
Thank
here.
you. Thank you so much.
You really are remarkable. Thank you for taking the time. Like we learned so much in that short time. Like I reset,
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a real honor.
You. Bye,
we'll
Keren.
see you in Austin.
Yeah, we're coming over.
I can't wait. I hope you come and visit us very, very soon.
Okay.
Ew.
Bye.
Bye.